Hello my friends and welcome back to my painting channel, and in this spooky edition of painting miniatures we are going to paint these really great looking xenomorph eggs. So these xenomorph eggs are from the Alien movie, so if you've seen the Alien movie you'll know just how creepy and horrible and awful these things are. And what we're going to do is I'm going to paint the one with the face hugger outside, just showing you the one on the left with the 3 eggs together, just to give you an idea as to how this is going to look when we get there. So as you can see, I have my xenomorph egg primed and ready to go, and this is a simple 3D printed model. So this is something that I've 3D printed at home, and the 3D prints and the STL files were completely free. I'll put a link in the description below. So I'm just going to start by using an Ardennes green. This is a really nice dark sort of green tone. This is a paint from scale 75, and this is a really nice, as I say, really nice dark base green. So this is going to be a really good way of getting this sort of horrific, sort of horrible green tone to show through. So I'm just going to cover all of the egg in this. This is going to be our base color, and this is just going to cover everything other than the face hugger. Then I'm going to use one of my channel favorite colors. This is Tenebrous Grey. This is a very dark sort of grey color. It is almost black. This is a really good color from the AK Interactive. This one dries down in a nice matte finish, and it has a really nice sort of finishing tone to it. It has a really great sort of finish to it. Now, once that is done, I'm going to use an Ishtar pink. This again is a scale 75 paint, and this one is just going to be for all of the inside of the egg. Now again, if you don't have the exact paints that I have, you can use similar sorts of paints. The Ishtar pink, you could use a nice sort of pink tone from Vallejo and things like that, which would also get the job done. A nice flesh tone from Vallejo would do just as well as this Ishtar pink. This is a really light fleshy sort of color, and that's all we're going to do is just create this fleshy sort of tone inside of the egg. Then I'm going to use an ochre. This is again a scale 75 paint. This is a sort of yellowy sort of tone to begin with, but as we build this up, this is going to create a really great looking horrific fleshy tone across the face hugger, and that's all I'm doing here is just base coating all of the face hugger here. And this is going to give this face hugger this great sort of ability to sort of stand off the egg, especially because of the colors and the tones and the things like that we're using. We're going to have this sort of greenish horrific sort of horrible tone to the egg, and then the face hugger itself is going to be much lighter rather than that dark base of the egg. It's really going to stand off that egg in a really cool way. Again, if you don't have that scale 75, you could use something like a Xandri dust from Citadel. That would do equally as well. Now I'm just going to use a brown wash from Vallejo. There's a load of different washes that you can use, and you've seen me use loads and loads of different washes on the channel, but for this one I'm just going to use this nice brown wash, model wash from Vallejo. These tubs are really good. They are very good value for money. You get a lot of wash in the tub for your money, and they are quite watery, which is great because this allows you to manipulate and move this onto the model and allow you to sort of choose where you want the heavier sort of shade and shadowy points to be. So as you can see, I'm just using an old ruined brush just to apply this, and I'm just going to make sure that this dries down completely. So I'm going to give this plenty of time to dry because, as I say, it's quite watery, and if you don't give it plenty of time to dry, then you're going to be painting sort of on top of wet paint, and that is not ideal. So make sure to give this a good hour or two and let all of that just dry down nicely. So what we're going to do is, once all of that is dry, so once we've dried down our wash and we've got all of that darker area and the shaded area done, we're just going to use a stippling effect using the very edge of our brush. We're going to go back to that Ardennes green, so that original green color that we used, and we're just going to use a stippling effect and a dotting effect, and we're just going to dab this across the model and across the miniature, and this is creating then this really interesting sort of tone and texture to the model. So we're using the brush sort of the stippling and using the brush itself to create a texture where there isn't really a texture, and that's going to create that depth because we've got that sort of brownish tone coming through from the wash and all of those sort of shadowy areas. We're then just going to build this highlight by using this stippling effect, and like I say, that tone, that texture, is really going to create a little bit of life and a little bit of character on something so simple like just an egg. Then I'm going to use an Ardennes green and an olive green. So I'm going to mix these half and half. So this is going to be one blob of each. They're from different paint companies, I know, but this is just going to give us a nice highlight tone and a real nice sort of first step up into creating this lighter tone across the top of the egg versus the darker tone just on the bottom of the egg as well. And again, we're going to use the exact same technique. So we're just going to use the stipple in the very tip of the brush. We're just going to use that to dab and dot and create this sort of texture tone and things like that. Again, just using the brush strokes and the tip of the brush. And this is a really great way of creating this sort of organic feel, this organic look to the egg. And as you can see, just by applying this, you are starting to bring up some of that sort of color, some of that tone. Now, I've done a lot of research on these eggs, probably more research than I needed to do on the eggs online, and looking at all different colour tones, and there are a fair few different colour tones out there. So looking at some of the original sort of artwork, some of the original props and things like that, you do see a few of these eggs can be quite fleshy, some of them are quite sort of blue-grey, some of them can be green and they have a slight green tinge to them. So I've opted to paint these in green just so that it gives a little bit of a difference, and again, this facehugger then is really going to jump out and stand off the colour. And again, with this sort of green is going to give us this sicky sort of horrific kind of feel and this kind of horrible tone, and I thought that would suit quite nicely for the painting of the eggs. So we're going to wait for that to dry, and once that layer is dry, we're then just going to use the olive green on its own. So we've done our base tone, we've done our wash for our shades, then we've gone back to our base colour, done our first stop highlight, which is a half and half, the olive green and the Ardennes green, and now we're just going to use the olive green on its own. And again, just using that stippling, just using that dabbing, as you can see, just tapping the very, very tip of the brush, and this now you can really see is starting to build a real lovely highlight to the egg as well. And again, now you can see what I mean by we're going to have a darker green down the bottom, ranging up to a highlight more towards the top, almost as if the light source is catching the top of the egg and the underneath is sort of shadowy and still in the shadows. And this is going to create a real nice texture and tone. Again, just that stippling effect, as you can see, just using the very, very, very tip of the brush and just using tiny, tiny, tiny dots. We don't need those dots to be too big. We want those to be nice and small so that it creates that texture. And as I say, that illusion that there is a lot more texture to the egg than actually you can see with the eye. So there we go, just dabbing, dabbing, dabbing all the way around. There you go, you could really see that colour, that tone, that highlight sort of coming across the egg as well. Just spending a little bit of time showing you sort of how I do this bit, because the highlighting, especially on the egg, is one of those focus points. It's one of the areas of the egg that you're really going to notice a lot more. You're going to notice those highlights. You're going to see that sort of sickly green, that sort of awful sort of light green tone, and it's really going to be quite a standout tone and a standout colour, which should add to a lot more of that character. Now, as an option, if you wanted to, you can always highlight just that little bit further. Pushing that contrast is always a great way to go when you're painting miniatures, even something as simple as just an egg. So I'm going to use this really, really, really light green, and then I'm going to use this very, very, very sparingly. So that's all I'm doing is, as I say, as an optional layer, just going to add a little bit of this real extreme highlight. And again, just using those tiny, 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 tiny little sort of stippling and dots and those little tiny brush strokes, just so that it only does a small amount of this extreme highlight. And this is how we're going to really build that extreme level of lighting. And again, now you can see that tone between the darker bottom to the lighter top, and it's really going to bring that character out of something so simple. Pushing that contrast in this way is a really great way of getting that extra depth through your model and your miniature. And again, I keep saying it's something so simple like an egg, because you could just paint an egg with a flat color and that would be fine. But we're pushing ourselves today, and we're going to push ourselves in this painting video to just build that contrast, because if we can push that contrast on something as quick and as simple as an egg like this and really get that tone and texture, then we'll be able to do the same thing with some of our other models as well. Then we're going to go back to that ochre. Now I'm going to mix that ochre with a light earth. These are both scale 75 colours, and this is going to be a really nice way of getting this sort of fleshy, horrible sort of skin tone out of the face hugger. So we're just going to use, again, the very tip of the brush, and we're just going to build that highlight back up now across the face hugger. So we're going to paint this across the carapace area, and we're just going to paint all of those sort of segments and sections individually, just like so. We're also going to pick out all of those sort of knuckles and finger sort of finger-looking legs, if that is a sentence that you could say, but these sort of legs that the facehugger has to make it look like a hand, they almost look like fingers. So again, we're just going to be very careful with the tip of the brush not to get this now onto the egg and just build all of that colour, all of that character, all of that texture. And again, we leave in sort of little gaps in between where the knuckles are to create that texture and tone as well. The brush strokes then across the carapace to give it a little bit more sort of depth and character and texture. And again, we're just going to build all of that up and around these sort of sacs and pods that sit on the back of the body of the facehugger. So I thought this would be a really cool and different sort of painting to do, especially for the spooky season around Halloween. And I thought this would be a real fun one to try to bring to life and try to do it justice and make it look very, very similar to what they look like on the movies. If you think that I've done a good job on bringing this to life and making it look like the movies, then don't forget to just comment below. I would love to hear from you. I always love engaging with you and talking with you guys. You always offer me such great advice and such great tips as well. So once we've done the first sort of stop, highlight that half and half, we're then just going to use the light earth on its own. And again, we're just going to pick out all of the detail across that carapace, around those knuckles and across those legs, and just like so, just kind of build in that highlight. Like we did on the egg, we're going to focus more of the highlight across the top area of the carapace. So we're going to highlight the area of the facehugger where the light is on the top, and we're going to leave the underneath darker, again creating that illusion of light and shadow, building that contrast and building that depth and character. I keep saying out to something so simple, and yet as we build and as we keep on pushing this contrast and keep on pushing those colours and those tones, we really start to see this come to life, and it really does sort of stand out, especially that colour tone, like I said earlier, of that facehugger really jumping out of that egg, and it really does look like a separate entity now, not something that's just 3D printed and compiled together. And again, you can see me really focusing the details now across those carapace parts, and again just using the very tip of the brush and just using stippling effects and very, very small brush strokes, and that's all about creating that texture, as I said earlier. The next highlight is just going to be a nice simple vampiric flesh. This is a much lighter colour than the light earth, and this is going to give us our real extreme sort of highlight tones. As you can see, this is allowing us to really bring out some of the light points across all of those little areas of the facehugger, all those legs, all those knuckles and everything like this. And again, that carapace, you can really see where I'm kind of bringing the highlight towards the extreme edges, the pointed areas, and that's giving us a real great sort of colour tone and contrast and light definition as well. And again, as I said, I'm painting this across the top, but not so much on the underneath, because we want the highlight to be on the top area of the facehugger, on the top area of the alien, not on the bottom, so that again it creates that warmth, that light, that texture across the top, giving us the illusion that the light is just coming down from above. So once we've painted the facehugger, we're going to add a very, very thin layer of Raglan flesh shade. Now you can use any flesh shade you like, but I'm just using a Raglan flesh shade from Citadel here, and that's all I'm going to do. I've watered this down quite a bit, so this is now just going to be nice and easy to manipulate and move across the model, and that's all I'm doing is just using this flesh shade colour to create a little bit more life, a little bit more warmth, and a little bit more tone in the colour. What I found when I painted it was the original sort of colour tone that I had out of it seemed a little bit too white, so I'm just adding this flesh shade which has this really nice sort of warm tone to it, just to kind of build a little bit more warmth and a little bit more of an organic feel to the facehugger. As you can see, I'm just being very careful not to apply this on areas that I've already painted, and I'm just covering the facehugger just to create that extra bit of depth. Then I'm just going to use that Ishtar pink once more, and this time I'm just going to stipple this just around the inside of the egg, and I'm just going to pick out all of those details in the area of the egg that has opened out. There seems to be a lot of sort of biology and a lot of sort of fleshy sort of tones inside of the eggs, and again, with all of the research that I've put into these xenomorph eggs, it seems to have a little bit of different sort of color tones. So I've opted for a nice Ishtar pink, and again, a reason for that is we've got this really dark sort of green tone, this sort of grimy, slimy green, and then having this sort of fleshy, sort of pinky undertone then on the inside just creates that illusion of sort of this sort of biological, this fleshy kind of tone. Once that's done, I'm going to use a pastel pink. This is a very light sort of pink tone, and this is just going to be an extreme highlight on all of those sort of fleshy tones. And again, as you can see, just using the very tip of the brush, just trying to pick out some of those details. It doesn't have to be perfect, doesn't have to be exact. These models are particularly small, but you are going to get a real nice highlight and going to get some real nice textures and tones out of this. And again, because we're expecting or thinking about the light source coming from the top, this is the area where you'd expect a little bit more of a light source, a little bit more lighting and things like that. And there we go, you could just see how it's all coming together just there. So all in all, it is as simple as that, to paint some really cool looking xenomorph eggs. If you like this video and if you think this video was great and informative, please give me a thumbs up. I really do appreciate it. Thank you guys for being so patient and waiting for me to get this new video out. And as always, if you think that I've done a good job and made it look like the movie, then again, comments down in the comment section. We'll discuss it and we'll have a great time. But as always, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching. Take care, my friends. And it's game over, man. It's game over.